this novel, Kandy Krush, Mirella's flatmate was murdered. And she realised that the police, which they're very busy, were not terribly competent, and were not, because this person wasn't well known or wealthy, they weren't terribly interested in solving the crime in any hurry. So she and her housemates decided that they would help to solve the crime, use their research skills and their people skills and their connections to work out, what happened to their friend and to bring justice to the perpetrator.
Because sisters look after each other, right?
That's exactly right. Especially, when you do feel let down by the institutions which are supposed to be dishing out justice, like the police force. So we had a character in this book, Detective Marlon, and he's a solid cop kind of guy, but he's super busy. He doesn't have a partner or a team to work with. He cuts corners. He's a bit dodgy. He didn't like the results of a DNA test of one of his perpetrators, so he bribed someone to change it.
I've noticed that a lot of your male characters are dodgy.
I'm not a misanthrope.
Instead of being honest.
There are nice male characters as well.
They're nice. There's nice ones, but they're dodgy.
The female characters are also kind of dodgy.
Yeah, that's true. And I love that about your books. Your characters are ordinary people. They really are. Because we read a lot of novels about rich people, about wealthy folk and their glamorous lives. And even when there's murder and all sorts going on, it's all very glamorous. But your books are about ordinary people.
Real people. Yeah, well, I guess I've lived a life. And, similar to John Birmingham, who was a great friend from University of Queensland and writing for Semper, the student paper. He got right into writing about young people in share houses and all the crazy stuff they got up to, because that was our lives and our reality. John actually rang us all up, all his Semper buddies, and interviewed us over the phone and recorded everything we said. And then sort of typed it out word for word and changed a few names, and that was his best-selling book. And I thought, good on him, and he has tapped into something, we read so much about America, and on the television we see so much about America in films. And, Australia has a bit of a television industry and a bit of a film industry, but as you say, a lot of the time it's the beautiful people and, who are beyond you and I and the everyday. And I read some of that stuff and, I can't really sympathise with the characters and stuff. It's like, what's this person complaining about? They've got it all.
And there's not that much that's set locally in Brisbane, like not in Queensland at all, but particularly not in Brisbane and Southeast Queensland. So it's great that your books are set
Right.
locally, and you can, I know that place so well, and you can identify with places.
Yeah, and I think Brisbane readers love that because, there's good stuff set in Sydney and Melbourne. But, everything has to be set down there. And we've got heaps of good stuff up here.
Yeah.
And
a culture that's our own. And I think you reflect that.
That's right. And the weather and stuff like that, the characters ride bicycles around town and walk around town, go jogging and stuff, like everyone's in the car all the time. Because that often annoys me too, as a sort of I drive a car, but most of my life I only ride a bike. So when I read every book and everyone's driving cars everywhere, I'm always thinking, well, actually, I want to represent cyclists and pedestrians and, people who don't partake in all those consumerist things every day of their life and show that there are different ways of living.
Yeah.
And they're just as valid.
So Mandy, because I write in a historical period, I do a lot of research for my books. Do you do a lot of research for your books? Like, it strikes me that you must, because they come across as realistic, and there's so many things that I learned that I didn't know before. So is that research?
Yes.
Or do you just know stuff?
No. If I can't find it out on the internet, I will write to somebody who will know, and I'll ask them questions, or I'll, get them on the phone and ring them up.
Yeah.
Because I think I've got so many diverse friends in all different fields. And if I want to know something about, museums or whatever, vet science, I can ring up someone or ask someone.
Or dipping one's grandma in formaldehyde.
Yeah.
Not to give away any spoilers.
The way that bit came around is quite interesting. So back at University of Queensland in the olden days, I was doing my arts degree when Victoria Brisbane took over for Triple Z. And so myself and a lot of people around me spent a lot of time down at Triple Z working out how to move the radio station off campus and stuff. And as a result, didn't do great at uni that semester. So my boyfriend at the time was a medical student and he failed 2 of his medical subjects. And because of that, they don't just, they invest a lot of money in medical students, not like us art students. They let them have supplementary exams in the January. So my partner at the time spent a lot of his December and January going into the physiology museum, the anatomy lab and all that stuff. And of course, he'd take me with him. So while he was studying, I'd be walking around the anatomy museum going, oh, look at all these pots full of people and bits of people and tattoos that have been cut out and fetuses with the cord wrapped around their necks and stuff. And at first I was really creeped out, but then you get really interested in that stuff, don't you? And,
But some people do, yeah.
I was fascinated, and fascinated also to see the age of some of the specimens. Is it the Physiology Museum that I'm talking about? Is that the right word for it? So it's a building, an old, maybe 1910s, 20s building, and it's specifically built.
Edith Cohen, is it? The Edith Cohen building? Anyway,
Yeah, that's probably it. So it's built so that electric lights don't decompose these human parts in pots. And there's hundreds and hundreds of them, of all different shapes and sizes. And so the windows are open down both sides to admit a certain amount of natural light so that you can see, but so the bits and pieces of people in pots don't decompose and keep lasting for a long time. So some of these little fetuses and stuff, gangrenous feet that I was looking at, had been there for 50 and 70 years. And so that's kind of something that got me thinking about.
Okay, so that's been percolating for a long time, hasn't it? Well done, you.
Well, I know there's a couple of circus people here tonight, and that aspect of circus has faded from fashion now. But there is one circus guy in New South Wales who, besides doing an amazing show where he swallows swords and puts his elbow in rabbit traps and all kinds of weird stuff, he also has a collection of medical preserved specimens, mostly animals, but things like 2-headed goats and, a mermaid and things like that. So when I was looking for a name for this character who would have grandma pickled in a pot, I thought, Shane Holden. And I asked Shane, I'm going to use your exact name, but I'm just going to change a couple of letters of it. Do you mind? Because I thought if there was one person in Australia who wouldn't mind a character named after them who collected specimens of dead people, it would probably be you.
So I'm guessing the audience has got a little bit of a flavour of Wizz Fizz from our discussion. And you've talked a little bit about Kandy Krush, which came before Wizz Fizz in the series.
Yeah.
Can you tell us if you're going to do more in this series? What's coming next for Mirella?
There is. I'm in the middle of, I'm nearly finished the next one.
Yep.
I had actually written this book blocked out just to introduce one character, Elise Forsyth, who's the one with the mental health problems who, at the start of the novel, she's in the mental hospital and she can't remember what's happened. And just similar to the patient who I had to look after. And then by the end of the novel, you realise, oh, that's how she's got to
Okay, so she's like a spin-off backwards.
Yeah, well, I think it was, let me see, 2019, 2020, so that's
Okay, so she's
and
spin-off.
that's the middle of the pandemic,
And then
this
this
is
is the next one in
2021.
the series.
Yeah.
With the private detective.
Yeah. And this is also interesting, the way that the pandemic has affected my writing, in that stuff before that I had done like international stuff, like this is set pretty much all in West Papua. The narrating character does come home to Cairns every now and then for a break, but most of the time...
This one is brilliant as well.
Most of the time she's in West Papua,
Yeah.
working as a doctor at the Freeport Grassmere mine, and getting involved in the Free West Papua movement, Papua Merdeka, any West Papua activists watching. And then when the pandemic hit, I thought, you know, I can't have my characters running off overseas and doing overseas stuff because it's the pandemic and the airports are closed and no one can go overseas. And so it actually made me think, well, look, these characters can do all the stuff they want to in Brisbane. They can still have that goal, that future goal of getting overseas, which they are actually working towards in the book that I'm currently writing on now. So I'm thinking, yeah, the airports are open again, they can go overseas. And in this way, I'm glad because I thought it's given a good solid grounding in Brisbane. My Brisbane writers will understand, and overseas people will think, oh, that's what it's like in Brisbane. You know, it's hot, they go to the pool, they sit around in the blow-up pool in the backyard, and it's too hot, do anything else. Or, you know, in the in-ground pool, if you're wealthy enough to have your in-ground pool dance. But I just tried to give that, this is a hot tropical city. Yes, we had a cold winter, but, you know, we do stuff outdoors.
So this girl's going overseas next, is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, so in the book that's 3/4 written.
Where's she going, Mandy?
Well, of course she goes to London because, you know, a lot of us have misspent some of our time over in London. Misspent youths. And sort of, because they're performers, going on the sort of European festival circuit, so doing a few sort of Euro gigs and spending lots of boring hours in buses and on the Channel Tunnel train and all that non-glamorous part of touring. Because, you know, you can't just have everyone getting up on stage and being fabulous and wonderful. We've got to have all the grit and boring parts in between to make it real.
Yeah, well, that's as I say, that's what I love. There is all the grit. I wouldn't say there's any boring parts, but there's certainly grit.
I tried to minimise the boring parts. What I actually really hate writing is violence and gore and stuff like that. But I realised that as a crime writer and a war writer, I had to address those things and I had to make it realistic. So I did stuff like watching YouTube videos about how to put your gun together and how to take your gun apart. Because I thought, you know, if I'm going to write about guns and shooting, I've got to know what I'm talking about. And so now, like, my YouTube suggested watching videos.
Does your partner sleep with one eye open?
But, you know, and I thought, look, for the West Papuan people, this is serious. They are in a war. They are trying to get rid of the Indonesian imperial.
And that's a different story, isn't it?
Yeah.
So these are kind of light-hearted, even though they deal with deep issues and disturbing issues.
Yeah.
But you do it in a way that's quite light-hearted and very, very entertaining, Mandy.
Yeah.
But Long Pork, I also read, and I have a long history with Papua New Guinea, and I did some very serious work as a medical anthropologist in Papua New Guinea. And the treatment in this book is a very different treatment. Your story is quite serious, even though it has its funny moments and your characters can be quite funny. You never once underestimate the seriousness of what's happening in Papua New Guinea. So that's great.
Yeah, and I spent a lot more time researching that one than all the others put together because I wanted to make sure I had those facts right. I've not been to West Papua. You're not allowed to go to West Papua. Like, unless you work there.
I have been, but I had to sneak and get back very, very quickly. It was a very dangerous situation. Yeah.
You're one of only a handful of people I know, besides some of the West Papuan guys, who I met working at the casino. And that's a kind of interesting story and a little bit dodgy too.
I'm seeing it.
Okay, so I was working at the casino one night and I was thinking, wow, you know, I've just walked from that door of this bar to this door and pretty much everyone in the room is a Papua New Guinean person. And I said to one of the other guards, I feel like I'm in Port Moresby, brother. Like, the Papua New Guinean people like to come to the casino because it's central. So if they live in the suburbs, they local, get into the town and meet each other there. There's no cover charge, so that's always a good thing. And no kind of dress deck regulations, and it's only 24 hours. So, so they would gather in there. And I was just sort of doing my hour in that central bar one night when one of the fellas said to me, "Oh, so you're a guard, are you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's what's it like?" I was like, "Oh, you know, it's pretty boring." And he said, "So have you got a license to have a gun?" And I said, "Oh, look, I don't actually need one for this job." And he said, "Yeah, you know, have you got one?"
Cool, wouldn't it? Take one in your purse, he's thinking.
And then he's saying, "So do you know where we could buy a gun from if we don't have an Australian passport?" And I'm like, "Mate, I'm not the person to talk to, but if you talk to some of the other guys who work there, here, someone's going to be able to help you out."
How does he think he's getting this done past customs on the way home?
One of the fellas I spoke to came over from West Papua in a tinny,
Okay, no customs.
no passport, no customs. He just hopped in the tinny and came over.
Yeah.
So, you know, and they're asking me to sell them a dodgy gun. I'm like, "Oh, let's blast one of the other guys." But, you know, the more I researched the situation in West Papua, the more I understood exactly why. And you know, some of these guys were down in Australia because they had, you know, they were wanted people in West Papua because they had been freedom fighters for the pre-West Papua movement. And if they showed their faces back in West Papua, they were going to go in some Indonesian jail for the rest of their life and eat a bowl of rice a day. So, and I think that's why Australia has heaps and heaps of West Papuan activists in all the cities and even all the country towns. And good on them, and I hope they do achieve their independence, because it's been 60 years up there that the Indonesians and the Americans have been sucking the blood out of West Papua from the gold mine and giving very little in return to the West Papuan people. And, you know, they thought they had their independence in 1966 and it was just snatched away from them. And so I really hope they do achieve it. And I guess this book is my way of helping out and sort of consciousness raising.
Story.
Yeah, in an entertaining way.
So, Mandy, we're on this topic of politics now in literature.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, you know, even in this more light-hearted story, or series of stories, there's still a political side to it. You're still talking about diversity, you're talking about social justice, and a whole range of things like that. How do you manage that? How do you approach that, inserting political statements, if you will, into your stories?
All right, that's a very good question, Karen. I kind of look at my life and the lives of the people around me, the issues, the political issues that affect us and that make us activists, whether it's peace activists or like all the young people who went to protest for climate action. I was just mentioning how I took my daughter Veronica and I think even my younger daughter along to the climate protests. And it was so wonderful to see like 30,000 young people, school kids, out there on the streets demanding something get done about climate action. And I thought, this is so fantastic to see these young people politicised, because I was thinking we were living in a time where people were reading the Murdoch press and believing all that kind of rubbish and, you know, being sort of brainwashed by Sky News and the right-wing media and not wanting to be politically active. So to see all these young kids being politicised over the issue of climate change really thrilled me. And I just kind of thought about all the issues, you know, like feminism and rights for, you know, lesbian, gay, transgender, intersex, queer people in our life. Because I've sort of seen, as I was inviting people to this event, I was going through it thinking, look at all my dead friends that I can't send an invitation to. And how sad that so many of my friends who have, you know, taken their own lives, and a big part of that has been not being accepted by the community for whatever reason, depression clearly, and untreated mental illness. So these are things I really want to talk about. And like, you know, I'm having a struggle at the moment because the main character of this one goes along to Narcotics Anonymous meetings because she's been a really bad drug addict. And then I was thinking, you know, my narrating character in this one, she's actually a pretty bad drug addict as well.
Borderline, isn't she, a little bit?
Yeah. So, yeah, she's possibly going along to Narcotics Anonymous meetings as well in the next book, because I was sort of thinking, oh, how ethical is it of me to have this character being this drug user and not being critical of her own habits? I am not doing anything about it.
She is, though. She's critical. She's starting to be critical, isn't she? So the next growth point would be to do something about that.
Yeah, because I don't want to be one to glamorise drugs and stuff. And I think I have tried to represent drug use in a non-glamorous way, and sort of showing the good points and the bad points. And yeah, some of my research with that was going along to Narcotics Anonymous meetings. And boy, there were worse stories at those meetings that I could ever make up and write in any book. You know, like so far out there that you could write it down and people just, oh, what's she on? Like, to write that. But it's like, wow, people's lives, people get desperate and will do anything and will force other people to do anything. And, you know, some of the Naranon meetings I went to, it was sort of like go around the circle and let's all show off about how many crimes we've done to support our habit. And almost as if people were trying to outdo each other. And it was a showing off competition. And I knew there were guidelines at AA and NA meetings where you're not supposed to carry on about what a good time that you had, but when you realised it was a negative time, it was affecting you negatively, and you had to get away from that, seeing those people start hanging with people who weren't alcoholics or drug abusers. And I've been through that in my life too, and it is difficult, you know. It can be extremely difficult, especially when all the networks alcohol or drug abusers in some way. And you're like, oh, okay. Like I'm sitting here with my naughty glass of wine, but I started to realise that, yeah, Australian culture is just built around drinking, built around getting really, really, really drunk. Because working as a security officer, these are the people that I have to help at the end of the night. And it's just, people don't bat an eyelid that their friends passed out in the loo or passed out on the floor or staircase, wherever. It's just, it's totally acceptable behaviour here. Whereas in some countries, people would just be appalled that of the level of drunkenness, which is publicly acceptable in our society. So, you know, I think that has sort of changed over my lifetime a little bit. But yeah, you walk down Boundary Street late at night, you'll see people riding their scooters one end and drinking on the other end. No comment on the footpath at about 60 k's an hour. And
Mandy, why do you write?
Ooh. I think I wanted to give a voice to people who have had similar experiences to me. At one stage, I realised that a lot of my characters had the names of my dead friends. And I thought, you know, I am telling these people's stories. One of my really close friends, Alex Whiteman, he was a doctor as well and a psychiatrist. I always thought at uni, if someone was going to write a fantastic book, a real knockout book, it was going to be Alex Whiteman. Because he was smart, he was handsome, he was talented, all those things. And he was a real party animal and politically committed. He could play the piano. He was a really great guy. But drug addiction got the worst of him, aged him prematurely, and eventually took his life. And I thought, how sad that he's gone now and never got to write any of the fantastic stories of his life. And it made me kind of think, you know, I can tell those stories. I know those stories. And similarly for a lot of my friends. And yeah, checking the friends list and the friends who have passed away, Now we're a bit older, you know, I'm in my 50s now, so people are starting to die of heart attacks and, you know, brain hemorrhages and normal stuff, like natural stuff. But I guess all my friends who I lost young at that university and just past university age, it was all drug overdoses, whether accidental or on purpose suicide or other suicides, or motorbike accidents, actually. So yeah, I've been tossing and turning about having motorbike riding in the next book, and I decided I want to have to describe motorbike accidents.
No one has an accident. There's no accident. There's no accident.
Or actually, I've written about helicopter accidents, car accidents. I don't think I've done a boat accident yet, but yeah. And I do try and, I know some writers are right into, like, you know, the action films, they're right into glorify all the action and the sort of injuries and that kind of stuff. I try and really minimise that and only speak about injuries from the medical point of view, to try and not to make it all be about action. Are we going to have questions from the audience?
Yes, I've run out of questions. So if anyone out there has got any questions for Mandy,
Yeah, I've got one. One of the things that kind of breaks my heart a bit with like popular culture and books is like the crime's a huge genre, but it's nearly always like women getting wrecked and women's bodies getting wrecked and women getting, I don't know, there's a lot of like the way in which that's portrayed, like the violence against women. And I guess the way that it's often done is really intense. Like how do you negotiate crime writing in a women violent kind of world? Yeah.
Really good question. And yeah, it's true though, like as a woman, we all know I've had heaps of violent experiences in my life. I stayed in violent relationships for years because I was in denial. And I, even though I'd had my feminist consciousness raised at university, it's the denial in your mind, as well as other factors like economic factors, trap lots of women in abusive relationships. I'm so pleased to have gotten out of the two abusive relationships I was in and left that behind. And I do try and address those relationships. In this book, the character Shayna, I guess in the first book where we first introduce her, she's brought a guy home from the club and he's violently raped her and then tried stealing things from her room. And she's had to call on her male housemates to try and get him out of there. And the Kandy character says to her, she said, "Oh, I feel so weak, I feel so stupid for making this bad decision of bringing a possibly violent man home." She clearly didn't know he was violent when she picked him up. And her friend said, "Look, you're being strong by asking for help, by getting out of there and not letting him have his way with you, by asking for help. That is strength. You know, strength looks like lots of different things. It doesn't just look like standing up and punching someone in the nose. It can be just getting the strength to get away." And, you know, I'm aware that, and look, through the books, there is violence against pretty much, you know, men, women. I haven't gone in violence against children yet, but particularly like gay and lesbian characters, transsexual characters, Kandy is killed in this book. Because this reflects our life. When I was young, we had a beautiful friend who designed clothes called Hairy Dog, and he sold clothes in all the shops around town and in Sydney and Melbourne. Mark Wilson was his name. He was walking home from the Valley nightclub one night towards his place in Kangaroo Point, and he never got home. And all we knew was everyone on Facebook was saying, "Where's Mark Wilson?" And even know where he is. They found his body in the river 2 weeks later. The cops never investigated. He was bashed to death on the Story Bridge and his body thrown into the river. He had everything to live for. He was selling clothes in London and Paris as well as Australia. He had his own place, he had his own car, which he left at home because he didn't want to drive home from the Valley nightclubs. And then he was bashed in a public place and the cops did not even investigate his murder.
So violence is a part of life, isn't it? But one thing that I was talking to my daughter Shannon earlier about the books and trying to describe the storylines to her. And I said, there's no graphic violence in these books. There's no violence described. You know how you watch just free-to-air TV now and you see really graphic displays of blood and guts violence. There's none of that described in these books. The violence is a kind of a lead up to and then an aftermath of. So it's about the characters, isn't it? It's not about the actual act of violence itself. It's about impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate describing that. And I don't like reading that. And I wonder about people who do like reading that. You know, look at America, 300 million guns, 35,000 gun deaths per year, a school shooting every week. Look at Hollywood films full of guns and glamorization of violence, toxic masculinity, all of that stuff. It's all through the newspapers, it's through the education system. People are brainwashed. And we can look at them and think, gee, they're brainwashed, violent idiots. But, you know, we are too. We are too. I get called upon in my work to break up fights amongst drunken men. And, you know, I'm an old lady, so I hop on my radio and say, I want some backup. I'm not going in to stop those three guys fighting each other with chairs.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a lot of guys think that once you've had your 6 or 10 drinks, that it's quite okay to bash your friends up and whack them over the head with a chair. So, you know, we're not much better than the Americans.
We just don't have as many guns.
That's right. And luckily, after Port Arthur, they took lots of people's guns away.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was great. You know, I'm not into John Howard, but gee, that was a really good thing.
Yeah,
yes.
the one good thing. Does anyone else have any questions for Mandy?
Mandy? Sorry.
Someone at the back, sorry. I'll come back to you, I'm sorry.
Sure. I think it sounds like it's an action happening kind of story, and I think it would relate really well to the screen, thing on the screen. So have you ever been asked to write the screenplay or been approached about this?
I have submitted it to, there's a Queensland group.
The Adaptable
Yes.
program?
There's a Queensland group called Adaptable that take books and scripts and make them into film and TV works. And I'd really hoped they would pick up on some of my stuff, but they haven't yet, but you know, we can dream on. Because the other thing I was thinking, this last book, there's not sort of one big overarching story. There's a few stories that are interwoven. And one of my proofreaders was a lady in America who I just met through her reading my stuff and writing really good reviews for me. And her feedback to me was, I know you think that the episodic nature of it is a weakness, but she said to me, I think it'd make a great TV series. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing, one of the things that affected us was, as a family, we recently sat down and watched, was it Veronica, that terrible?
The Sopranos?
Oh, not The Sopranos, the other one where they made the crack.
Oh, Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad. And like, yeah, there were some of the All Hello's mums online going, do you think we should let our 15-year-old son watch Breaking Bad? I'm thinking, I'm not even going to say that my 11-year-old watched it last year with us. But when I look at that kind of crime and sort of think, yes, this is real life crime with real life people in real life situations.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the crime seems clearly much worse over there in the States than it is here. But I could see the realness of those characters in those situations. And I think that's what made that really strong, as opposed to a lot of the American cultural product, which is just so
Hollywood.
Unbelievable. Hubby took my other daughter out recently to see Top Gun. They're like, do you want to come? And I'm like, oh, brother, I'll got my arm off. Look, I know heaps of people like that stuff, but I'm trying to do something completely different with my writing than sort of glamorization of armed forces and macho masculinity.
Yeah.
I'm sort of trying to do probably the exact opposite of what they're trying to do in that film.
Yeah. I am so sorry. I cut you off. You're next.
So, Mandy, you were asked before about why you write
Yes.
and expressed that it was you telling other people's stories. But I really think it's just your creative spirit. You love doing this.
Oh, yeah.
You'd have to be expressing yourself in some other way if you weren't doing any stories. So if you weren't writing, what would you be doing to express yourself?
Well, what I did before was work as a performer. And so I worked for a long time. I did a drama degree and then I sort of did a lot of musical theatre and opera and stuff like that. And I thought about it after a while, after I'd done like 30 or 40 shows, and thought, what am I doing? Some of these shows pay me, some don't, but it's not the money that's the important bit. I thought, and it came to me that what I liked doing best was acting in my friends' shows who had written their own original script, and it was the first time bringing it to the stage, the first time telling that story. And I thought, yes, that's what really does it for me. And so as I worked through the circus, I learned from some really good dramaturgs like Louise Goff at Volcano Circus. She's now, I think, the head of Screen Australia or something down in Melbourne. But I really learned from her that language of telling a story with your physicality, with your movements, with your acrobatic poses, with your posture and facial expression. Because there's a big thing in circus of like not talking on stage, which to me is so weird. And in my circus shows, we had talking and singing. So I loved, as I got into the sort of more managerial roles in the theatre, I loved writing theatre shows and directing theatre shows. And over in West Australia, I actually had a great job managing the Circus School of West Australia, where I got to write a huge show every year, as well as smaller shows, direct them, give other people a chance to direct, give other people a chance to write. And God, I was doing that too. And I foolishly thought that when I came back to Queensland, I'd be able to get another kind of performing arts job like that, and hadn't really realised that, wow, the arts is crumbling and the institutions are downsizing and closing. And I actually haven't had another full-time arts administration job since 2007. So I thought, okay, there's got to be another way that I can express myself. My first book was just like a how-to book about acrobatics. So that's from what I learnt as an acrobat in the circus. And this was the first time I realised, wow, with my academic skills, my writing and researching and compiling skills, I can use what I've learnt in my physical classes, use photographs and drawings and descriptions, and put that knowledge down. And I was trying to research for this book. There was one book written in Russian and one book written in German, but I could understand the pictures. I photocopied them all, and that was part of what made me realise, yeah, someone's going to write it in English, because we don't have a resource like that, which is basically just a how-to about acrobatics. And I know I had a bit of kickback from some of the acrobats I knew saying, well, you're not that good an acrobat, you know, you're describing dances you can't do. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not. I didn't take it up till I was like 25, which is practically ancient amongst acrobats. You know, a lot of them are doing it at school and high school. But I said, but my skills mean that I can write about it. You know, and I never claimed to be the best acrobat. I wish. I look at those amazing acrobats and I'm so full of awe and that it's the stuff they do is even possible. And yeah, moving back from West Australia, I had to decide whether I would sell all my stuff and just fly home, or if I would pay for a shipping container to take all my stuff home and then fly home. And the suitcase full of acrobatics photographs that made up this book was the deciding factor that I would, in fact, pay for a shipping container and make myself completely broke in the process, but I couldn't throw them away. I've been collecting acrobatics photos since I was a little girl, and you know, and they're all in there, all the really good ones. So yeah, I go through my books. I think I've got 3,000 books at home, and that's after I've taken probably that many or more back to the second-hand bookshop. But you know, some of them you can't leave. They're specialty, especially books your friends write and stuff.
So Mandy, you're a creative. That's what you are. That's who you are.
Yeah, and writing books is a great way to tell stories, because when you tell a story on the stage, the only people who get to hear it or see it are the audience that come for that week. And then the show's just gone off into the ether. But there might be a few scenes of it on YouTube, but the magic of that live performance has gone. And, you know, very few plays even get published in Australia. Since I started a Goodreads page, I made an effort to review as many Australian plays that have been published as I possibly could, because I realised after these books aren't even up there, I've actually spent a lot of time scanning in covers and making pages for some of the classics of Australian literature, which Goodreads being an American site, they couldn't give two hoots about Australian theatre. And I thought, well, it's up to us to put these books up there. And, you know, because we've got so many good theatre writers in Australia, and, you know, they're all waiting tables and on the dole and working in government jobs or teaching, because I think the playwriting is an even smaller niche than fictional writing in Australia. And there's probably only a handful of people, if that, in Australia making a living out of writing for theatre. And that's pretty sad too. Because, you know, when you want to be one of those people and you work towards it for years, and then you realise actually, you know, there's no money in it at all, unless you can get arts grants funding.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the scary thing, when it suddenly hits you right in the face and you actually there is no money.
There's no money in it at all.
I do it because I can't not do it. But there's not any money that's going to start coming magically.
So what makes you write, Karen?
Don't you wish this evening was about me? But unfortunately it isn't. Does anyone have any last questions for Mandy before we wrap up?
I was going to ask Mandy, firstly, if you could talk us through the book jacket design for both Kandy Krush and Wizz Fizz.
Oh,
We are lucky to have the talented Veronica Curtis-Channing here tonight, who designed these beautiful covers for Wizz Fizz and Kandy Krush and Locked Out. So Veronica designed the first, all of them, these two when she was at school, and then this one this year that she's been studying at the Queensland College of Art, Griffith University. Veronica doing her visual arts degree. And they just represent scenes from the various books, important characters. This is the topical character of Kandy, who's a musician and who happens to be a trans person, and who had wanted her musical manager to market her just as a musician, but he got the idea to market her as a trans musician. And then when she's eventually killed, it becomes clear that this is an aspect of her murder. She's been targeted for that reason. Anyway, I asked Veronica, I described my friend who is a musician and how she liked to play and how she'd have the keyboards all stacked around in different angles. So she came up with that great looking down from above, and she's kind of really going off on the stage. So you can see that my performing arts stuff comes through, because, you know, you write about what you know, and I spent 20 years working in performing arts, so of course I'm going to write about that stuff. But, you know, my master's degree wasn't in that field. It was, I examined rape and sexual violence in my master's of women's studies, or sociology, as we say in front of the men. Because I wanted to know, you know, why has this happened to me? Why has this happened to all the women around me? What can we do about it? How can we stop it happening? How can we change it? And how can we prevent sexual violence from happening to our daughters and the next generation of young women coming through? Because, you know, I don't know any woman who hasn't been sexually assaulted. And that includes my nun friend. So I know there are women out there who haven't been sexually assaulted, lucky things, but I sort of think they are in the minority, and we've got to do something about it. We've got to, you know,
They've at least got to talk about it, eh?
absolutely address it and sort of my characters have had different ways of dealing with those aspects of their lives, it does make some come to a point to think, what can I do to change my life to stop this happening to me? And
I think what we need to do is what you do in these books. We need to talk about it in all its complexity and all its nuances. So much of what we see on TV is reduced down to a kind of stereotypical story or image of a woman and of an incident or event. We need to know that there's a complex range of diverse kinds of events, diverse kinds of ways of responding to those events. You know, we need to have stories about the complexity.
that's right. To take the police as an example, Mirella first of all goes to the police. She wants her friend's murder solved. And then she realises that the cops are not really going to do that. So she works towards investigating herself. Another character in the book looks at the situation and thinks, no, the cops aren't going to do anything. And he decides that he's going to join the Hells Angels bikie gang and get justice that way. And I remember growing up and thinking, oh, Hells Angels bikie gangs, they're all really bad people. And then meeting some people who actually were in this sort of bikie scene and thinking, actually, you know, these are really good guys. And I know, I read the newspaper and watch the TV news and all that rubbish. I know that the bikies are into a lot of bad organised crime and that sort of stuff.
But we're complex and diverse as human beings, aren't we?
That's right. And there is good and bad in everyone. And I guess that's what I've tried to show in my characters, to make them real people.
Yeah.
You know, because if everyone had a great time all the time and everyone was beautiful and glamorous.
But that's not really a story, is
No,
it?
it's boring. And not believable.
Were there any last questions from the audience? Karen, do you have final words?
No.
Oh, let me just ask Karen about her new book, because her first book was set on Stradbroke Island, Murder at the Dulwich Asylum, and it's a historical book, so it was set about 100 years ago?
1884.
1884, so 140 years ago, and really interesting. And
So that one's set in the asylum that was at Dunwich on North Stradbroke Island. Then the follow-up one is Plantation Murders. It was released on the 1st of March, and it's set on the sugar plantations in the Logan Beanley region. And it involves a Kanaka who's only in the country for 24 hours and he gets blamed for a murder that he didn't commit. So it's all around the South Sea Island labourers working on the plantations in Logan. But that's, you know, this is about you.
well, I read that one too. So I thought, oh, Karen's got that one out too. But yeah, and I would suggest to any other writers that groups like the Sisters in Crime are a really fantastic way to meet other writers who will like read your work and give you good feedback, and also just sort of say to you, hey, you know, we're all in this together. And here's some strategies that work for me.
Can you afford coffee? I haven't got enough for the coffee.
That sounds like us. Can we afford to keep our special Brisbane Sisters in Crime prize going? Yes, we can. That's right. And I actually joined the Australian Sisters in Crime today too, because I realised I was only a member of Queensland and not Australia. Oh, and I'll give one final story. I was shortlisted for the Sisters in Crime Scarlet Stiletto Award like 30 years ago. And so it was down in Melbourne, and I thought, oh, I'd love to go down to Melbourne for this. So I went, my mum had frequent flyer points. I was a Provo student at that time. And so I went down with mum and the frequent flyer points, and we stayed with a friend of hers down at like that really nice beach suburb, and went along and met the Sisters in Crime there. And the most interesting person was Tara Moss was there. She won the Young Writers Award that year. And she was like this tall and beautiful and very interesting. And I remember being amongst in this room full of women writers talking about all this interesting stuff. Oh yeah, I think I finally
Found my tribe.
yes, absolutely. And I've gone on to watch Tara go from, you know, strength to strength, and now she's a huge international star. I'm like, good on her, because I remember that was when she'd written her first short story, and it was pretty much her own story about being a model, coming from Canada to work in Australia, and then being hunted down by a nutcase. And then the way that, and also, strangely enough, the police not helping her out and her having to find her own way out of being ruthlessly stalked by some kind of sociopath fellow. And yeah, then she went on to expand that from a short story and become a book. And a whole series of books. And now she also writes historical like you do, Karen. But yeah, thanks everyone.
I love that. Tara Moss writes historical.
No, well, I mean, in the Sisters in Crime, we've got all kinds of different writers, and that's great, because if you all wrote the same, it'd be hell boring. And I loved this one. I kept me reading until the end.
I think that's all we have time for tonight. Mandy, I think your passion for writing is just so evident, and Wizz Fizz sounds really fascinating. We've got copies of Wizz Fizz at the front counter, as well as some copies of Kandy Krush as well, if you haven't picked up your copy. We'll move inside, it's a bit warmer in there. You can grab your copy and also chat to Mandy and get it signed. Thank you, everyone.